A new study has found a genetic link connected to sexual orientation, but there is no, quote, gay gene. The largest study of its kind was published Thursday in the journal Science. It looked at nearly 500,000 adults in the US and the UK and found new evidence that genes could play a role in people's sexuality, but there is no specific gene that makes people gay. Instead, researchers say being gay is influenced by both genetic and environmental factors.
The study involves almost 500,000 middle-aged people from Britain who volunteered to donate blood samples and answer questionnaires for a project called the UK Biobank. Scientists paired that with information from tens of thousands of white Americans who volunteered to answer sex-related questions for the genetics testing company 23andMe. Benjamin Neal at the Broad Institute says the study's focus isn't on a person's sexual identity or desires.
What we really focus on is behavior.
The scientists compared genetic variants in people who say they had at least one sex partner of the same sex to those who said they had no such encounters. The study, published in Science magazine, looked through millions of genetic variants to see if any significant differences appeared.
And when we do that, we, identify 5 variants that have some influence.
Just 5 out of millions of variants analyzed.
The first thing that's most important is that they represent very, very, very small effects. Together, the 5 variants account for much less than 1% of the variability in the traits that we're looking at.
So they explain virtually nothing about the behavior, and they reveal little, if anything, about the biology that might underlie those genetic variants. Using another technique, the authors say genes could still influence 8 to 25% of the behavior they studied. But even in a sample of 500,000 people, it was impossible to tease out anything about those genetic variants. One obvious conclusion from these results is nobody's going to come up with a blood test to predict these sexual behaviors.
Individual level prediction is effectively an impossibility.
The title itself didn't even make sense.
Right,
If there's no gay gene, then there's no gay gene. Why are you talking genetics after that then?
I think there's 2 problems. One, all the people were of European ancestry, so it's not really looking at this and the population of the world as a whole. And number 2, all of these individuals that said they had same-sex behavior just had to have had sex with someone of the same sex at some point. They don't necessarily identify as being a homosexual. So I kind of have issues with that. Like, if you're going to say these genetic variants have something to do with same-sex behavior or being a homosexual, I'm not so sure I'm buying that from this particular study.
That leaves Cecile Janssens, a professor of epidemiology at Emory University, puzzled why this study was even published.
I don't think that they found anything that is worth reporting.
She notes that findings like this should be replicated in different samples, but in this case, only 3 of the 5 genetic variants showed up in a separate sample.
So 2 of them didn't replicate at all.
And the broader findings don't apply to other populations, different races, places with different cultural norms, or different age groups. Perhaps an even larger and more diverse study would shed more light on these questions, but pulling together a study like that would be an enormous challenge.